what we can learn by looking
going
at
live.
And on that bombshell.
Yes. Man, I just can't get the camera right ever.
Who moves it out of interest?
Well, no, I need to resave the preset.
Okay.
Because it's set to a preset from our old lighting setup.
Uh-huh.
And so it's just too bright every week.
So this is the intro.
This is the intro of the podcast. Welcome, everyone, to the Red Couch Theology podcast.
Today we will be talking about camera settings for
this is the podcast. We still don't know what we're doing.
Yeah.
And by we, I mean
how long have we been doing this
Alex
for?
has never known what we're doing. No, I'm just... It's for technically.
How long have we been doing this for now?
I don't know.
Are we on like year 3?
It's a good chunk of time.
Chunk of time. And we still haven't figured out how to make it marketable.
No, we haven't. But
it's a good job we enjoyed it.
We shared some news last week, but for those who didn't listen to last week's episode, while I fix the camera, would you like to tell them our slight tweak starting next week?
Next week, we will be running Alpha here at South, which is the first time in a long time, right? Yeah. I mean, it's been a whole bunch of years. So during those weeks, we're going to be asking our 50 to 60 Alpha people if they have any deeper questions around the subjects that come up within Alpha. So this is the forum that we'll be using for that. So what we hope is this: if you send in questions about a sermon, then they'll still be answered here in this space. But but we'll also be using it for Alpha questions as well. Does that cover?
Yeah.
I mean, not very succinctly.
You're good at this.
I don't know.
You should run this podcast.
You know what's actually weird is when you're not there, I'm like, wait, do I talk to the camera? Or the camera?
He doesn't even know where in the room the camera is.
It was just there. You just moved it.
No, I didn't.
Oh, darn it.
Wow.
Didn't it used to be there?
I just made it focused. I didn't change its location. Yeah, so I'm excited about that. And yeah, you can sort of get a little sneak preview into some of the content we're covering in Alpha, and maybe you'll want to take it the next go around.
Exactly. Yeah.
So we already have, one of the things I'm kind of excited about is that Alpha is this just super low hanging fruit to invite people who you love and wish went to your church, wish that you could talk about the things of God with. And suddenly like Alpha's like, you know what? That feels pretty comfortable to invite people to. Yeah. So we already have one of our leaders who's like, we did leader training last night. They're like, so I could invite this friend of ours who's this. Oh, I'm definitely doing that. And I'm like, great. That's awesome. So it's already brilliant. We haven't even started the class and people are inviting people to it. So it's awesome.
I love it.
Yeah. Let me just figure out what we're talking about today. So this week, you talked about blindness.
Yeah.
And
well, actually Jesus talked about it and I just talked about what he talked about.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I loved your last point. Let's get our ducks in a row. Let's go through the message, but your last point was so fun and comical and accurate. So you broke it down into these 3 movements. What
Jesus does, what people think about what Jesus does.
And my favorite one,
Jesus says about what people think about what Jesus does.
Yeah, so good.
I put those in just to help me think about it.
Hey, and it was memorable because I have the 3 movements in my head. Yeah. I could have,
And in the end, I was like, I actually think there's some humor to the ridiculous length of the second one.
Yes.
Or the third one,
the third one. Yep.
Yeah, it seems to work out well.
Yes.
And of course, it all starts with a theological conversation, which is interesting to me. Because I always think the theological conversation comes primarily after something. But in this case, the theological conversation is almost used to, I don't want to say bat the theological conversation away. It just seems like the whole of the thing's going to be based around this theological conversation.
Yeah.
And then Jesus almost dispatches the theological conversation with surprising ease in one verse. And then they never come back to it.
Yeah.
Suggesting it was never as central as they thought it was.
Yeah. Yeah. Something you and I have talked about, just, I don't think on the show, but another thing that's kind of fun that you highlighted the reality that these several chapters are like one day.
Yeah.
And so something that I've observed about this and how it sort of handshakes to the previous few days, there's a lot of debates about the Sabbath going on. And those debates actually started not on this same day, but like the previous big healing that took place, where a guy gets healed by the pool and everyone's like, but it's the Sabbath, and they debate. And then there's several days, and then this day happens. There's a bunch more debates about Sabbath stuff. And then this story happens, and almost like this exclamation point where Jesus, and then John mentions, by the way, it was the Sabbath.
Yeah. And then this miracle story is also a bit of a compare and contrast on the first one. So the first one, Jesus heals the man, he goes to the temple. The man never recognizes Jesus as anything other than a healer. And Jesus says to him, go and sin no more. With some inference, you could take that he has been responsible for his condition. Yeah, you don't have to read it that way, but that's certainly how some people read it, that there's some level of like his own actions that led to this.
Interesting.
And so then that makes sense of the Pharisees, the disciples' conversation.
Yeah.
You know, oh, so Jesus, what about this guy? Like, was this his fault? Maybe his parents' fault.
Yeah.
And Jesus says, in this case, there's no, in the message language, there's no such cause and effect here. But then he's compared because, well, Jesus goes, finds him in the temple as well.
Yeah.
And he comes to believe. So there's one that gets healed, goes about his old life, and we hear nothing else. One that is healed, meets Jesus, becomes a disciple of Jesus.
Yeah. And then there's this fascinating sort of compare and contrast to physical blindness, physical sight.
Yes.
Spiritual blindness, spiritual sight, and it is not a secret at all because the religious leaders even call it out, right? So you have a blind man who's also spiritually blind, potentially.
Yeah.
He gets physical sight, and then he gets spiritual sight. And then you have sighted religious leaders who they have physical sight. And then by the end of the chapter, you find out, according to Jesus, that they're spiritually blind.
Yes, totally. Yeah.
Which is fascinating. So, what was the big punchline of the message, though, to the big idea of the message?
Well, it took me a while to land on something I was happy with because it's so convoluted, and you almost like, you know, I was doing this with a group of pastors, this message before I preached it. And what we do together is we sit and we'll have a note in our page of like questions that says, what's the big idea? And I actually looked at one of the guys who gave me like the thing he'd filled in, and he had about 5. And then the last one with it starred, like, because at that point you really clear. And this is the big idea, but this is some of the tension,
struggle
right?
of more of an inductive method, right? It was a little bit, and I think you and I both tend to lean inductive when it comes. So if you're listening, trying to find the big idea early on, we're intentionally withholding it until it kind of blossoms.
Yeah. And it's really not there to start with. And so, you know, at one point I talked about being certain versus curious.
Yeah.
You know, that stood out to people, that you know, and that seems to be the way that the Pharisees and the man are placed against each other. But then there's this old Genesis story that pops up in the middle of it, you know, where the guy is repeatedly referred to as the man. It's always the man. It's very specific language. It's over and over again, which is how Adam was addressed or titled in Genesis 1 and 2 before the fall. So there's like this throwback of Jesus creating.
Yeah, so there's this mud situation. He creates mud and puts it on the guy's eyes.
So you can't ignore all those, and they deserve to be highlighted.
Yeah.
But when you get to the end, it becomes really clear that the story's always been about this one thing. And it's always been about blindness spiritually. The Pharisees actually, despite all of this time with Jesus, get all the way through, and their last statement about the man, or to him directly, is the same as the disciples was at the very beginning.
Okay.
So you start to see this like zero progression from them. The Pharisees ask, is it his fault? Is he the sinner? Or is it the parents' sin? And the last thing the Pharisees say is, you are steeped in sin. Like they're still accusing him of being responsible for his situation. All the way at the end. They still are completely spiritually blind to what's going on. They're blind in regard to the man, blind in regard to Jesus, blind in regard to themselves. So it seems like Jesus has actually been talking about that from the very beginning.
Yeah.
And so he kind of, when he does his big reveal at the end, where he says that, I have come that those that are blind may see, and those that claim they already see perfectly well will be made blind, will be revealed to be blind in the message version.
Yeah.
So,
okay. So we didn't get any questions that were submitted. So the question I thought that might be intriguing for us to do is maybe something we don't do super often on the show, but is to talk a little bit about and try and give people maybe a sneak preview in how you approach studying a passage like this. Yeah. Because it's huge. There's so much dialogue.
So much, yeah.
And I thought maybe we could pop the thing on the screen for those who are watching online, and then we'll describe sections of it. And like maybe if you could kind of, I don't know if you'll be able to remember obviously you've read this way long ago, but like this week or last week when you're studying and prepping, when you read this for the first time with the intention to teach it, whoa, there you go. And then what was your process to hone in and get to the conclusion?
And this works well because we were actually talking about this a bit this last week. So
So we're chapter 9. So if you want to kind of follow along, you can just listen. The entire chapter is this story. Tons of dialogue, 40 plus verses. It's almost 50, right?
Yeah, I think it was 39.
Okay, yeah. And it kicks off. I'll just read this first verse, and then you can just walk us through like how you started to like follow trails to conclude where you landed. As he went along, he saw a man blind from birth. His disciples asked him, "Rabbi, who sinned, this man or his parents, that he was born blind?" And then the story starts to unfold. And you already told us, Jesus says, neither one. And then it starts to unfold. So how'd you get into this?
So usually what I do on a macro level with preaching on a given week, and because I preach more than everyone else, I don't usually have space to think about it super far in advance, other than on like a notes level. I'll have pages for each, a pages document for each sermon I'm preaching in the next however long. And if something just happens to occur that I'm like, oh, I know that story's coming up, that would fit really well, I'll just drop a little note and it'll sit there waiting maybe for 4, 5, 6 weeks. I think I just put one in for John 17 just the other day that we're doing on and sometime in March or something like that.
Yeah.
So that like usually I'll always hope to have something to come back to at some point. One of the things I always try and do now, and I will say I do this more if I'm not happy with the sermon the week before.
Okay.
But on Sunday night, when I'm preaching the next Sunday, I'll just get out my Bible and I'll just read the passage. Just not for any like sense of like, I'm trying to analyze this. Yeah. I'm not trying to get some sense of like flow. I'm just trying to read it and just see what God happens to highlight in it. So it's just a reading through to be like, okay, this is the passage. This is what's coming. I've got a good sense of it internally now. Like it's started to do whatever it's going to do in me.
Yeah.
And then I will, before I even get to study verse by verse, I'll try and just section it in my mind. So I'll know the story and I'll just try and say, okay, this section seems distinct from this section. In this case, with this passage, it works really naturally because you have a scene that Jesus is in, a scene that Jesus isn't in,
and then he's
and then another scene that Jesus is in. So automatically
so
for
that
me,
as your structure.
So what I actually wanted to do, use the scenes to do without saying it, was to give them a sense of where the character movement is. Because this could actually be a play, right? You could actually have run it on stage. You got a dialogue between Jesus and his disciples, and a man just sat there listening, and Jesus heals him. And then he goes off stage and almost walks into a new set where he washes, is healed. And then the conversation goes on.
There's a whole bunch of stuff that happens.
And then there's a conversation with him and the Pharisees as Jesus is offset doing something else.
Yep.
And then he
comes
goes
back in the scene.
Back to another set, this time a temple, and Jesus walks into that scene. And that's unusual in John, because one of the things we've talked about in John is that Jesus is in almost every scene. He doesn't drop out very much.
Yeah, so you get a little bit of like, in the middle of this chapter, you get this unfiltered commentary on the behavior of Jesus from the Pharisees with this guy. They're like, grr, you know, and they start almost trying to attack Jesus, and by the end, they're attacking the guy.
Totally, yeah. But what John does that's really clever, and I'm only going to assume it's cleverness, I mean, it's just brilliant writing, is he'll take little snippets of the other Gospels and he'll tweak them, but write them in his own way. So if you think of like the Jesus of the Synoptics, what's one of the big healing stories in the Synoptics? 10 lepers come to Jesus. Jesus heals them, says, go and show the priest. 9 of them disappear off, and only one of them comes back. So like now in this story, Jesus actually creates a healing and then just leaves it up to the man. He doesn't follow after him. He's not walking with him to the pool to see this incredible miracle. He's just like, okay, go wash. It's up to you now.
And the guy doesn't even know who he is.
Doesn't know who he is. All he knows is he's got spit and mud on his face.
Yeah.
Brilliant.
Dude, the moment in the sermon when you had us all close our eyes.
And I tried that with the guys, and the guys all loved it as well. So I was like, okay, this is going to play pretty well.
Yeah.
But they that sense of like, he's an active participant in his own miracle story is just brilliant John work. Like, he just loves stuff like that. And so that like, for me, I've got those scenes then, and then.
So your first pass in a text
after reading it is
to just maybe try and divide it structurally.
Just try and block it a little bit. So I've got some sense of like the bigger flow, because otherwise you just get very stuck in, well, what's this verse about? What's this verse about? What's this verse about? What's this verse about? Without any relationship to everything else going on.
Yeah.
So like this passage for this coming week.
And it's helpful to do it on that. Sorry to interrupt, but it's helpful to do it pretty fresh off the other one, because usually there's a handshake to the previous week.
Totally.
And so that's fresh in your mind, and you're like, okay, there's a certain kind of momentum. You just finished preaching, and then you go into the next passage, you read it that night, and you start to see, the momentum is still tumbling.
Because for this week, I'll actually finish I'll start with the last verse of the week before, because John 10 just rolls straight. It's not even like, oh, they were walking away from a conversation and, some further yards down the road, they ran into a guy. Like in John 10, it's still mid-flow of conversation. It feels like the subject changes to us, but you can almost picture the Pharisees still like, rah, are you saying we're blind? And Jesus giving them their response.
Not only are you blind.
Yeah. And then he just carries on talking. So you almost like need to pause in your mind, the scene with the fists raised and the anger, and it has to sit there all through the week. And on Sunday, you have to kind of be like, oh, and picking up from where we were last week.
Yeah.
This is the continuation of the story. So yeah, you're absolutely right. In this, like in lots of these cases, the scene just flows on from one.
So
one to the other.
if you were to extrapolate a tip,
Yeah.
someone's trying to learn how to read the Bible for themselves and interpret it themselves. Maybe some of that is to like read, especially when you're in a narrative passage, to read larger chunks of that narrative. And sometimes there's just too much for your mind to maybe like wrap itself around, and you're like, you've lost. If you start to read so much that you've lost some spatial things and where they're located and some of that, fair enough. Like you can cut it off in the middle of a narrative, as almost these chapters do. But read a chunk of it, enough of the narrative, and then start to sort of like mentally section it apart of like, oh, movement 1, movement 2. Because again, it's narrative. This is designed by an author.
And I'm always shocked but unshocked by the number of followers of Jesus that would say, wait, they didn't put the verses and chapters in, or chapters and verses in, when they wrote it?
Yeah.
So the chapters and verses are incredibly useful, except when people put them in, they had no concept that years down the line, we'd be reading books with chapters and watching TV shows that pause at the end of episodes.
Yeah.
So everything in our like normal workflow for those things tells us this is a cliffhanger where we're told to pause and they're going to come back in with something next week.
Yeah. And a lot of times, like the biblical authors, or not authors, but the copiers, translators, and those who added the chapter markers, they do a pretty good job. I'd say 80% of the time. That's
probably fair, yeah.
Breaking at a good natural break. But then there's 20% of the time the breaks are really unhelpful.
And that 80% of the time, it only works if you hold in your mind, this is flowing on from what I read the time before.
Yeah.
If you come at it from like, this is brand new information, this is the start of a new conversation, this is the start of a new action, this is actually, even with them being good at it 80% of the time, it can send you into a world of like misunderstandings.
If you remember, the text, the last passage you had me preach, where I concluded, I'm pretty sure it's not in the original manuscripts, I was lamenting to Alex. I was like, I don't even know how to study.
Yeah.
Like without context.
Sure.
Because I'm pretty sure this isn't the context. I was like, I don't even know how to approach a passage. Like the first 5 or 6 steps of my study process is all contextual work. Yeah. Is like finding out what's his overall flow in the entire book. What's the immediate flow in the last few chapters? What's the flow in the following few chapters, so that I can say this, I have greater confidence that when I interpret this, it can't fall outside of that context. And then the last time I preached, the passage is more inserted there, and you're just like, jump ahead to step 7 of exegesis. So it was like,
and so that sense of like, it's good to know that Jeremiah 29:11 says, I know the plans I have for you, plans to give you a hope and a future. But it means much more when you know that promise was spoken to a group of people in the midst of a military occupation that had lost any sense of a hope and a future. And that God had been promising them to care for them for an awful long period of time.
Yeah.
And that this was the lowest point of their existence. And that eventually God was faithful to them. Now there might be questions then, well, am I allowed to extrapolate that promise and
myself,
make it about me? And you might say, well, there's other passages in the New Testament that say similar things. So yes, based on that, we know that God cares for you as an individual, has a plan for your future, a hope for you, all those different things. But the promise makes much more sense when you know it was a real promise to real people that was actually fulfilled in real time.
Yeah. And just another observation, as you become a student, like, or a sort of a pupil of Jesus, or a follower of Jesus, and you're walking with him, and you're on a lifelong journey with Jesus. And part of that journey is scripture reading and engaging the scriptures. You'll get better and better at some of this stuff.
Yeah.
Partially because there's an even wider context that takes place. And we already alluded to that early on in this conversation, so now Alex has spent, many of you don't have time to spend your career and your day job isn't reading and interpreting the Bible. So it may take you a little bit more time in your life to get this. But when Alex reads a passage like this, not only is he thinking about John chapter 8 and John chapter 10 and how it all flows together, he's reading this and he'll bump into a phrase and be like, that reminds me of Genesis chapter 1 and 2. And so the wider context is the entire scriptures is a cohesive
Starts
piece.
to make sense,
And so he's also mentally doing some shorthand because he's just saturated in it all the time.
Yeah.
And so he'll run into a passage and be like, that's probably a hyperlink over to here.
Yeah.
I'm going to have to chase that trail later. And then another one. So as you notice that and you live and breathe and continue to read and continue to read, these kind of contextual cues will start to just jump off the page.
Like most hard things, that probably has 4 stages, right? The first stage is, this is super hard. There's no way I can do this.
Yeah.
Stage 2 is, this is super hard. It's going to take a lot of work for me to do this. Stage 3 is, this is becoming easier, but I still have to really think about this to make it happen.
Yeah.
And stage 4 is, this is like breathing. I did this not because I thought about it, but because it's just what I do.
Yeah.
When I approach a passage. Like, that's what most of us do in a little bit of a scary way with driving, right?
That happened to me yesterday where I was like, was I watching the road or not?
Yeah. I've gone driving places for a reason and just found myself halfway to church.
Yeah.
Without even thinking about where I'm going. I'm like, I was supposed to go the opposite direction to church. But
yeah, and all of this is by design in the scriptures. It's like the gift that keeps on giving because it's so saturated in both God's wisdom and in the best of the best literary genius that as you continue to read it for a lifetime, it just keeps on unfolding and unfolding and unfolding and unfolding.
So next phase, I'll just read through the whole if I'm doing a passage, the whole passage with a commentary. So I'll pick my favorite commentary on that book. I'll look at others at different points for other ideas, but usually at this point in John, I know that now Craig Keener is my favorite John commentator.
Yeah.
So I'll just read along with him the whole of the passage. I'll circle stuff. I'll grab ideas. I'll pull quotes out. I'll kind of notice how he sees the flow, compare it to how I see the flow. And only then at that point do I actually start writing anything, and start getting that sense of like where I think the flow is that I'm called to present. And of course, that's all mixed in with prayer and saying, God, like, what is your wisdom here for this? Like, what do you have for the church? What's your heartbeat? Like, if I can get a sense somewhere, having done that, of, okay, I think this is God's heartbeat for me in the church in this passage, that usually then grounds for me how I try and shape the flow. So as I look at John 10, little spoiler for podcast people, John 10 actually moves through multiple phases too. At one point, Jesus is talking without naming himself, almost in parable form. The next minute, he's talking about himself as a gate to life. And the next minute, he's talking about himself as a good shepherd. If you wanted to express that in a simple flow, it's Jesus says, I am the good shepherd who gives life through his death. Like, it just means that you've moved through all of the different pieces.
There you go. You guys don't even need to show up on Sunday. That's the whole thing.
Sure. Yeah. There might be some other stuff there as well. But that, like, the sense of the heart of the passage is really there. Like, it's not only is the Good Shepherd isn't just an arbitrary picture, but he's talking about himself. And he's talking about his gift of life. And it happens through his death. And that's where you get to see in that passage, well, that's the surprise part.
Yeah.
Like.
Okay. So then, since we're referencing John 9 and we're kind of doing a little bit of like behind the curtain, how to study the Bible, how to read the Bible, how to interpret the Bible, were there any sections in your preparation this last week for John 9 where you kind of maybe chased a rabbit that wasn't necessary, or you got held up and you had to kind of do some extra study, or you're like, I don't know, maybe it's this. I don't know. Like, can you talk about a moment where you kind of got short circuited?
So this one actually was surprisingly easy. This one was one that came together, and I was like, oh, this just felt like it fell in place in front of me. Okay. It didn't feel like it was me. Maybe it was that I had to be done early. I had a court case for a guy that we're in connection with here at South on Friday. I had a birthday on Saturday for one of my kids. And I was preaching it on Thursday. So I was like, I have to be done by Thursday morning.
Yeah.
Like, it has to be ready to go so I can run through it for them. And so this was one where I was like, okay, now I've seen Jesus clears away this theological argument. And the rest of it kind of flows from there. Once I'd done that, it actually fell into place pretty well, with this exception. I found myself in this middle section where I was like, I am just reading texts and talking about them without a bigger, larger idea about what is going on here.
Okay,
and that's when I started playing with the, well, in the middle of it, there's just the back and forth conversation with the man and the Pharisees.
Yeah.
It's actually much harder to preach parts of the text that Jesus isn't in. Because when Jesus speaks, you get some sense of, okay, this is stuff for us to do. Like, Jesus is actually going to give us some certainty here. We know what Jesus says is right.
Yeah.
We know what Jesus says is good. When other people are speaking, like, well, how do you know?
Yeah, they could be completely off base.
Yeah.
And in this case, the guy doesn't know Jesus, so we can't trust him.
Yeah.
We can't trust the Pharisees. You have these two untrustworthy parties or confused parties having a very extensive dialogue.
Totally. Yeah.
So then how did you muddle through that? Like, as you're like, oh, do I skip this section? Yeah. Do I, like, if someone's reading the Bible and they're like, they get lost in the weeds of this and they're like, why is this in here?
Yeah.
How'd you do that?
And so then the beautiful thing with a text like John is you get to ask, well, what do I think John has this in there for?
Yeah.
Like, does he have a purpose here that maybe isn't about just directly saying, this is what you should do or this is what you shouldn't do? Like, what might he be trying to reveal in the midst of this? You know, he's now living 60 years after these events. He's pastoring churches. He's training believers.
That's great.
What's his context for all of that? Is there some level which he's not speaking to us 2,000 years later? And he's not actually speaking to people of the time of Jesus, even though that's the way the language is playing out. Could he be actually talking to his own people?
Yeah, okay.
About their own
So I want to highlight that. So one section is this one of the tips is this looking for the general flow of narrative.
Yeah.
Looking for scene changes, character movements, and sort of trying to bucket some of those. Mm-hmm. Context. Mm-hmm. We talked about that. What precedes, what comes after, and is there any tip or any like observations you can make about all of that? And then this one is wait, reminding yourself that John is writing not when these events took place, and he has an authorial intention. He's trying to communicate to some church, or a group of churches that will read the book of John.
Yeah, who have their own problems.
So then you have to say, wait, who is John writing to?
Yeah,
and why would John include this funky section in this passage?
Yeah.
So what was your conclusion there? Who is he writing
to?
Well,
then this was the interesting part for me. Then you've got to decide, well, how technical do I want to land on this? Like, what percentage of the church wants to really nerd out on with me, and what percentage wants something a little bit more application orientated?
Yes.
So a lot of commentators think that this section where the man's thrown out of the synagogue comes from a document called the 18 Blessings of Heretics.
Okay.
So,
we're going to nerd out for a minute.
The Burka Harminum, I think it's called. And so around the time of John, some really Orthodox Jews put together this document, which is 18 blessings for heretics, but it really means 18 curses. 18 things that you hope happen to people that
are bad.
That are bad.
Yeah. Okay.
And one of them is directed towards Christians. And so that the argument of some of these people in the more academic stream is that there's not really a record of Christians getting thrown out of synagogues or followers of Jesus getting thrown out of synagogues anywhere else in our readings of the life of Jesus.
Okay.
You know, were there even synagogues in Jerusalem? That was up for grabs for different parts. Like, was everything located around the temple? Why specifically synagogue and not they threw him out of the temple? Like these different things like that raise questions. Like, it just feels like it's pulled a little bit out of its own time. It's like, wait, which synagogue? Like a synagogue in Jerusalem? Well, was there only one? Could he just go to another one? Like, how is this all connected?
Okay.
And so then when you start to pull this context into, well, in some of these small towns, there's these people throwing people out of the one synagogue in town. Suddenly it makes a little bit more sense. So the suggestion, and again, I'm not fully on board with this, is that some of this language is actually giving Jesus an opportunity to speak encouragement to those that are experiencing what this man experienced
60 plus
years down the line. So again, that's the academic world. And that can sometimes be very different from the church
and
world.
The wonderful / terrifying thing about academics is like sometimes they get so hyper focused on one nuance that they can just be completely unhelpful.
And that they have to keep writing new things if they want to keep making the dollars.
Yeah, some of the weird stuff that's come up from the biblical theology space where you're like, okay, if they could just zoom out 1 degree, they would realize that they're talking nonsense.
Absolutely.
But the thing that a lot of these biblical scholars are actually really exceptional at is noticing details like the fact that why in the world is there a synagogue in Jerusalem when there's the temple in Jerusalem?
And we now know there were synagogues, but it's very specific to a specific place.
Yep.
And you know, it's almost like saying like they threw him out of a specific church, but he lived in a city where there were 35 churches and he could have gone to any others. That makes more sense when you think, well, it's a rural town in the middle of nowhere with one church, and then suddenly you can't attend that one church. That makes it a little bit more
interesting,
relevant.
So in the middle of your study, you did this first pass, you've got some basic structure, you've noted mentally some like potential hyperlinks to Old Testament passages, you've seen the context, and you kind of have a pretty strong hunch at this point what the main thrust of the passage is going to be.
But I'm going to keep it till the end.
But then you get to this middle section and you're suddenly like, you read in a commentary about this debate about sabbatics, you're like, oh, I got to chase this lead at least a little bit to see if it's relevant to my sermon.
And I'm also like, if I'm trying to describe the sermon as a journey at that point, I'm like, you know, it felt like to start with, we were driving through some really interesting landscape and the end's kind of interesting as well. But in between that, there's like 80 miles of just desolate
you're in the middle of
highway,
Nebraska.
Eastern Colorado. Like it just feels like it's a.
And you're like, is that a wildflower? Should I talk about that one wildflower? Is there any hope in this section?
So then there's got to be so that's when I started looking at how the characters interacted and how they're talking about what's happened and about Jesus and about God and about or Jesus as God. I suppose is the best way to say that. And so that's when I started trying to press a little bit on like, well, what does Jesus seem to encourage as an attitude towards himself? What does he tend to warn people about? How does he tend to like operate? And what sort of people are the people that end up following Jesus well? And what are the people that tend to end up rejecting Jesus?
Okay. So, but to close the loop on that, that messy middle of this text, Jesus isn't in the scene. Sort of scene 2, where he's not a part of it. How did you wiggle your way out of this debate about synagogues? Did you decide that none of that was helpful reading?
Well, I think
how did you just?
Yeah, I just gave a brief reference, right?
Well, so like, was that rabbit trail that you chased in your study time, did you end up using it as an interpretive lens?
Well, I did, yes. So I just threw out, hey, a lot of academics think John is writing to a different audience here, and just gave them enough that if people want to follow it, they can follow it. But it's going to take a real nerd to want to delve into that world.
Okay.
But I started thinking.
But that doesn't mean you didn't use it. So like, you can use, for example, again, now we're talking about reading the Bible plus preaching it, but there's all these Old Testament references here.
Yeah.
And anytime you're teaching, especially a large passage, you don't have time to go read every cross-reference, especially when you're reading a John passage. There's just so many
of them.
It's obnoxious. That you may use one of those cross-references to an Old Testament passage to give yourself greater confidence that you're interpreting correctly, but never mention it to the congregation because you don't have time.
Yeah.
Was that messy middle your conclusion about the whole writing to a different audience? Did you use that to like bolster your confidence in your final big idea?
No, it really actually helped me in that section right there.
Okay.
So with the idea of the certainty of the Pharisees versus the curiosity of the man, which seemed like a healthy extrapolation of, that's exactly what's happening in 90 AD too. There's a whole bunch of people that have had this curiosity and actually come to faith in Jesus, take the step that the man will take eventually. And there's still these Jewish leaders around that are still certain that the old truths, the old ways are still exactly how they're supposed to live today.
So you didn't have to tell us as the audience that you followed this, rabbit trail.
No.
But when that movement, at the way you unpacked it, you got a little confident from that exegesis.
Yeah, absolutely, And then you get like these parallels that start going off in your mind all the way through Scripture. Suddenly you're thinking about, Paul talks about like, how many of you are wise? How many of you are wealthy, important? Like, no, that's not who's here. Here is those that are curious, that are desperate for something more. Like that's how he characterizes the church. And then you think through how hard it is for people to see God in that tend to, and I've been this person and maybe still am at times. That's the risk. You get very certain about how God works. I remember sitting in a Pentecostal church. I was probably 20, 21 years old. And I remember thinking about theology. And I remember looking back and saying, wow, isn't it incredible? Every big theological conversation in history, the Pentecostal church was right on. Like we've landed on the right side every single time. Isn't that incredible? Like we were like, like when the split East and West, like we were the right side. Protestants versus Rome, right side. The work of baptism of adults, right side. The gift of the Spirit, right side. Like we're batting 1,000 in terms of what God wants for his church. And then you get old enough to spend time with Eastern Orthodox people.
Yeah.
And they're like, no, you were wrong the first time. Yeah. Like, and you've been wrong.
And then you're like,
ever since then because of that.
I think I agree.
Yeah,
like,
sure. Yeah.
You're like this understanding, of like the Trinity or something. And like the Eastern Orthodox Church just has this gorgeous expression of talking about the Trinity and and those relationships. And you're like, meanwhile, the Western side of that argument just kind of in the process of the debate lost some of the beauty of the.
They dissected it and it died in the process.
Yeah.
Like the frog that you cut up in school. Like you can't survive the endless debate.
Interesting.
And the Eastern Orthodox Church were just much more comfortable taking it as a living truth and living into it. So I think that then suddenly you've got all of these alarm bells going off for the church, local and worldwide, for yourself, for the people that you know in a community that are pulled by different elements of culture, each of which has a very certain view of who Jesus is. And so suddenly you're invited into this place of like, oh man, there's one thing we should be about Jesus that's curious.
Yeah.
Like if there's one thing we should be able to say is, I don't have him figured out yet. Our good friend Carolyn Schmidt has a lovely an exegesis I love about Isaiah 6, where it talks about the seraphim and the cherubim bowing down repeatedly to God. And she said at some point, God said to her, she asked him, how are they still excited? And how are they still lost in worship? And she said, God said to her, because they've been worshiping me for, eternity or whatever you want to phrase that as, and they still haven't come to the end of me. Yeah. They still haven't got me figured out.
Yeah.
And so that's the beautiful posture that the man has right now. He's so curious about Jesus. And you watch as he grows in confidence, as he says more and more. And his last phrase is exactly what Nicodemus has said. This legendary teacher of Israel.
Interesting, because that was an interpretive perspective on Nicodemus when we were studying that section, where Nicodemus is the one character who's curious enough to approach Jesus. Mm-hmm. He stays curious enough to say, let's withhold judgment too soon. Yeah. And then all of that curiosity culminates at the end of the book, where he's one of the few religious leaders who gets it, and maybe even gets it faster than some of the disciples. Yeah. And it's curiosity that drives it.
It's curiosity, yeah.
Wow.
So in scriptural level, curiosity doesn't kill the cat. Curiosity potentially makes the disciple. Like, it potentially is the thing that we get to do, where we keep waking up every morning saying, I wonder what God will reveal about himself today if I'm paying attention. Will I get to see another little facet? We at South get to start working with kids at, a few weeks old, and get to see them come up through middle school, elementary through middle school, high school. But none of us, I think, would ever say of them, I hope that the faith they have here is exactly like that 30, 40 years down the line. Yeah. We want them to grow, and we want it to become their own, and we want them to see Jesus in new ways. And they will, like, as they go through hard things, suffering, as they experience loss and rejection and all the sort of things that just is a part of life. In each new way, if they'll let him, the God of the universe will reveal themselves to him. And that's exactly what Jesus says at the end. He says, if you can put up your hand and say, I am blind, that makes you a good candidate for God's revelation. If you put your hand up and say, I can see perfectly well, that makes you a good candidate for never seeing God very well.
Verse 41, Jesus said, if you were blind, you would not be guilty of sin.
Yeah.
But now that you claim you can see, your guilt remains.
Yeah.
It's, curious. And this is actually talking about scripture in general. If this isn't how you're supposed to approach scripture, or how formation actually happens, a process of being curious about Jesus for a lifetime, then why in the world would God have provided us a text like this?
Yeah.
It's the nature of the scripture itself, the genres. Why in the world, if you wanted to create certainty in your followers, would you ever include a poem?
Yeah.
And almost 1/3 of the entire Bible has poetic representations in it. You're like, if your goal is to create absolute certainty and like clear up this issue, black and white, don't ever include poetry. So it's like God's inviting us on these journeys, and every text, every story is supposed to kind of let you explore and progress and all of this sort of thing.
And so then this becomes the hard thing, because, and I said this on Sunday, I'd say it again, what we're not saying is there aren't truths to hold on to about who Jesus is that have been passed down over thousands of years.
Yeah.
We're not arguing, I'm not arguing against those things, and I hold on to those things too. It's actually the everyday experience of God we're talking about here. Now, theology comes into that, and actually the fascinating element that we talked about with the academy is a desire, is a curiosity to know more. There's a famous book by Raymond Brown on John, The Community of the Beloved Disciple. And his argument in that is that Jesus had two groups of disciples. That, the reason John is so different is because it's a different conversation at times. And in the opening to his book, he says, if you can accept 60% of what I say, I'd be delighted. He's just swinging for the fences. He's like, I'm just going to try out some new ideas. And if you can buy 60% of them, that's going to be great. So sometimes what the academy does can feel a little bit of a stretch. And it probably is, but it's its own way of trying to be curious and trying to figure out who God is and how he's revealed.
Yeah, and the best theologians are the ones that hold their conclusions with open hands.
Yeah.
And I would argue that the majority of those in the academic space, tend to help with that process.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
There's a few conclusions out there that some theologians make where they just become bullheaded about, like, this is what I wrote my dissertation on. I can't see anything but that thing anymore.
Yeah.
And those tend to be the ones that I find least helpful, where they're just like, this is definitely how you interpret this passage.
Yeah.
Yeah.
There's a great Old Testament writer called John Goldingay. He was a British guy, became professor of Old Testament at Fuller Seminary. And John's he's just incredible in his breadth of knowledge. But he has these great descriptors about how you both read a text and try and engage with the God of the text. And he says, on one hand, people always say, well, there's reading the text and believing. So you read it at its simplest face value level, and you just say, that's just what it is.
Yep.
Now, that has a load of problems, as we know, because all of your culture is involved in reading the text, all of your assumptions that you bring to it, and you may never get very far with it at all. And then he says, on the other hand, there's criticism. It's reading it, trying to pull it apart, trying to, the historical Jesus movement, trying to say everything that we believe means nothing.
Documentary hypothesis, all these things.
Throw the baby out with the bathwater method.
Yep.
And he says both of those are wrong postures. He says what we do here is we do believing criticism. We deeply believe in the God who gave us this, the God who came and died for us. We deeply believe in the story.
Yeah.
But we're going to ask as many questions as we possibly can about what God might be trying to say through this text and what it means. And so the metaphor that comes to mind then is, it's like standing in a spot, and to keep you safe, someone's built walls all around you.
Okay.
To make sure that you can't get very far from that spot. And the problem isn't that you can't move, it's that you can no longer see. Like, now your vision is blocked and you can no longer quite see clearly.
Yeah.
And I think what we try and do when we come to the text is we try and push down the walls that have been built, not so we can run from the spot, but so that we can see God more clearly.
Yeah. So I had a professor, and he said something, and he was talking about Old Testament narrative primarily, but I think it's true with most, maybe not most genres, but like narrative and poetry and stuff. He said the first task of interpretation is imagination.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And he said, so here's what I want you to do. I want you to read the passage first few times and let your imagination run wild.
Sure. Yeah.
Just, what time of day was it?
Mm-hmm.
Like, how was this character feeling? Just like, let your imagination try and picture the scene, go crazy. Mm-hmm. And then, like you do, go through it with commentary, historical context, the context of the author, and rein in that imagination.
Yeah.
So, like, if you say, oh, I think so-and-so feels like this.
Yeah.
They're so sad. And then you start to do exegesis and you find this, like, ancient Hebrew phrase that represents that they're happy. Well, you have to throw out the sad imaginative thing. Oh, he's not sad. He's actually happy because we see this phrase show up in all these ancient texts, and that figure of speech always means the character's happy. Yeah. Okay. So you can like remove that imaginative thing. But this is how how the Bible tends to function, is you're supposed to insert all of this exploration, curiosity, imagination, in order to get an interpretation. It's designed for that kind of engagement.
Yeah.
And then you rein it in with the interpretive skills that you have over the years.
Yeah.
And then come to this conclusion with you have a really robust text.
Yeah. Well, so one of the interesting things about this passage, and I didn't get here because it felt at the time a little too much, and all sorts of reasons really, but at its heart, the passage is epistemological.
Okay.
It's about how you know, how you can tell truth, how you can find the answer almost.
The theory of knowledge.
Yeah. And the Pharisees believe that you can find knowledge because somebody told you the answer. And the man believes that you can find knowledge because you experience it for yourself. So the Pharisees are like, well, no, it can't be this because of everything we've been told before. And the man believes it because he says,
that's
you
cool.
say he's a sinner, he opened my eyes.
Yeah, I don't know.
Like, one thing I know, once I was blind, now I see.
Which is the best mic drop maybe in the book of John.
Yeah.
You're right.
I mean,
like,
just a fantastic
he's like,
line.
that's a great argument. Nifty. Cool. I can see stuff.
Yeah. So he's like, your problems are like, you don't know where he comes from. You don't know who his family are.
Yeah.
You don't know how he fits with the narratives that you've been given.
Yeah.
My problem is you want me to reject him for all of those reasons. And yet I experience something beyond any of those reasons.
Yeah.
And that deep down is what you hope a church community is about. We want people to believe first, like, and this comes up in John again.
Yeah.
First, we believed because of what you told us. Now we believe because we've met him for ourselves. Like, that's what church is supposed to be about. Like, no one in the end can say, I believe because someone assured me they experienced something. This faith is still an experiential faith. Like, that's why we have as one of our pathways, we want to create experiences that lead to encounters with Jesus. We want people not just to get knowledge, but have an experience of God. Yeah. And the good news of Christianity is there's still the God that appears in visions to Iranians all over the world right now.
Yeah.
You know, revealing himself as the man in white who loves them, who died for them. Still appears to everyday suburban folk in Colorado too.
Or maybe this last Sunday when we're worshiping being led by one of the Tico students, and you're just like, oh, this is only God does this kind of stuff.
But
and you're moved
this is
by
where John's brilliant, because he talks about all that. And then he
Yeah.
gets to this week and he starts to talk about it, not as seeing this time, but as hearing.
Yeah.
And he starts to let us know that we are being called. It's all about whether we hear or not.
Yeah.
You know, and you know, that's his brilliance. That's his gift of a book that presents the same Jesus, but with these beautiful different elements.
I love it. Well, I hope you enjoyed a slightly different kind of episode this week where we just walked through Alex's study process. I hope that was insightful. I know it's a lot of text to cover, but maybe if you have time, you could go open up the book of John to chapter 9 and sort of follow Alex's process through it and learn a few things about how to engage this wild, crazy text that the Holy Spirit's preserved for us. Yeah, on that bombshell. While this page loading, I can't even end the episode because the page won't load. Come on now.